So we're 5 weeks back from Camino, and I thought it might be nice to share some thoughts on that post-Camino experience. I'm going to try and multitask on my phone. That's always a recipe for disaster, reading stuff off. So Devon's away flatter than I realised it was. Before I went away, I considered Devon to be, isn't this beautiful? Really quite a steep, valleyed, hilled county. There's not much water going down at the moment. No, loads of water. And I just couldn't get over walking on the Camino. You know, most of the time we were at 1,000 metres and we could nearly all the time see snow-clad mountains. I mean, just little tiny pockets of snow, but it was like, wow, okay. They were hashing here last night. I know that because I was up here having a walk and a swim. Can't believe how many cars on the road. Oh my goodness! We got used to the idea that you could walk on a country road in Spain and you might see a car an hour. Not much more. I mean, obviously there were some busier roads, but if you go on the minor roads, it was rare to see a car. And then we came back via Portugal. We had 4 days in Portugal on the way back, and Portugal's roads are even quieter still. So expensive to eat out. Gosh, I just can't believe how I just got used to the Camino prices. You know, just in this incredible positive tube on the Camino. So that, all these lovely fellow pilgrims and the people that support, the businesses that support the pilgrims. It's quite interesting. I live down in the southwest in Devon, and we spent a lot of time in Devon and Cornwall, and tourism is hugely important to the economy down here. But I can definitely say, hand on heart, having spent most of my life since I was 12, and I'm 60 now, where the locals are constantly berating the tourists, and so in one breath we need the money, but in the other, we resent the fact that they block up the roads, and we end up with all these. In Devon they call them grockles, which is a local name for holidaymaker, and in Cornwall it's called hemmets. But yeah, so the norm in Devon and Cornwall is actually we don't like the tourists, even though they're incredibly important to our economy. On the Camino, that's definitely not the case. I mean, my goodness, locals go out their way. A lot of the businesses are run by fellow pilgrims. So not only you got the positivity of the pilgrims you meet along the way, but also the people that run the businesses. Generally felt that. Can't believe that people work in cafes. I just got used to the fact that you went into a cafe and you sat down and you had a chat, and you might catch up on your social media or open up an email or bits and pieces on your phone. But in general, especially the locals, they just go in there in the morning, at lunchtime, in the evening, we'll buy probably one drink, and then we'll spend an hour or more sat in there just chatting. I went into, it's a beautiful local, isn't this gorgeous? Water level's really quite low at the moment. Got a lovely local cafe, quite a recent one, a community cafe in Heavitree Park, and I went in there, and I'm pretty sure everybody was working. They all had their laptops in there. They weren't doing that sort of just checking up on bits and pieces. They'd gone there to, I mean, it's a lovely place to work, but that's been a bit of a shock coming back. We drink loads of water. We particularly love sparkling water, and so we both went out with platypuses, and it always had a horrible taste of plastic, and just a fag to fill, and the fishy. The water be warm, and so actually to go and buy 90 pence for bottle of water from a bar that comes chilled with a slice of fresh lemon. And so we were drinking probably 3 litres a day, if not more. Can I get back up to the path? I'm going to hit pause for a second. Yeah, so we drink loads of sparkling water, which is great, and we use a soda stream, and that's a lot of money to recharge. It's 15 quid to recharge a little tiny gas bottle. So I've been working on trying to find I like the fact that we're reusing bottles and not disposable stuff. I'd stopped eating chocolate. I loved chocolate, and I am eating a little bit, but I find it sickly sweet now. That's still 5 weeks after the Camino. I've got off of my sugar addiction, I guess. We do like desserts, but we got in the habit on the Camino of sharing a dessert, and something I don't think I've ever seen in England. But if when we went into a cafe or a bar or a restaurant and ordered one dessert for the two of us, they'd always give us 2 spoons. They wouldn't even ask if we wanted 2 spoons. They just assumed that we were going to go and share it, which is lovely. it's great because you're consuming less food, and it's really nice to go and share it, and we still do that a lot. So that's helped a lot with our calorie intake. Way better at not buying rubbish. Taking on a great walk today. We're up at Hannock Reservoirs. It's one of my favourite places to come down to. Usually got the dogs with me, but I've been working on my landy, so no dogs today. There we go. So way better at not buying rubbish, and when I've sort of become weak, and I do, I quite often I'll eat a bit and then throw the rest of it away, which is great as well. Eat less than I used to, and sort of really conscious of portion sizes. Lost quite a lot of weight, 11 kilos on the Camino, both of us gone down 2 trouser sizes. We needed to, and then I started putting a little bit more weight back on again, and then I've actually continued. So I've lost another couple of kilos since I got back. So that's great news. Eats really into salads. Got into salads in a big way. So the fridge is absolutely full of salads and vegetables, which is exciting, and eating way less carbs. Super fit when we got home. I lost some of that, although I'm like most people. I was sort of walking 10,000 steps a day before we went, and my aim is to walk 20,000 now. That's a bit of a challenge. When things are going well, I take the dogs out for a spin in the morning, and an hour is about 5,000 steps, and then do the same in the evening. And then, like most of us, when you potter around, you tend to do sort of 10,000 during the day, and hey presto, you end up with your 20,000 steps, which is double what I was doing before. Ooh, bit of a steep climb there. Let's see what else I got on my list. Less tolerant of negative people. There was Joanna Lumley, a long time back, had a chat show, and she said she treats everybody as lovely, and if she finds they're not, she dumps them super quick. And I've become somewhat similar. I think I'm better at listening. Way more. I've always been fantastic. It's an on-back hashing bit across on the wrong trail. Yes, I've always been really observant of the world around me, and I'm now even more so. Little things, whether it's flowers and insects, or some of these beautiful trees. That's it. That's kind of exciting. Realised, I've always been a very positive person, but realised that actually every day is a gift. And so I've always been really good at, when I wanted to do something, let's get on and do it. But I'm even more so now. And we went to a wonderful outdoor armchair show at Plymouth a week or so ago, and Kerry ended up writing down some places that she wanted to go to, and I've done the same. And I found myself going, well, that's great. Okay, so when are we going to do it? What are we going to do to actually make that happen? And so being a lot more proactive about pushing those things forward. Working hard to declutter, surprising. Quite enjoyed it. We've done quite a lot, but there's a lot more to go and do, and that's really very therapeutic. You know, one of the things with the Camino is realised that everything we needed was on our rucksack. We didn't want anything else. We didn't feel like we were missing anything. And so you get back home and there's all this stuff everywhere. It's like, wow. Okay, so we've been going through and getting rid of loads of that stuff. Loads more to do. The recognition, I think I already said it, that actually everybody's beautiful, and you know, if they're not, then the chances are there's something going on in their life which is causing them not to shine that day. I'd written down, I kept a journal while we were away, which was I had a read back through some of it, and that was actually a really good idea. So as well as a video blog that you may or may not have watched, also kept a journal each day. Probably the only last third I got in the habit of the stamps you put in your pilgrim's passport, actually getting that stamped in my journal. And it would have been nice if I'd actually done it all the way through, because it's really nice. So it's almost like a piece of art of all the different cafes and churches and alberges and bits and pieces we stayed in. But I also kept another one which was kind of like some thoughts and bits and pieces, and one of those was sort of like I wrote down what I thought might be a ritual. We really enjoyed having fresh orange juice. Fresh orange juice is just astounding. I mean, they press it in front of you in Spain. It's just absolutely everywhere. It's laden with sugar, not added sugar, just natural sugar, and so you don't want to have too big a glass. Some places gave you, sort of a bit bigger than a shot, and that was nice. Some gave you a huge, great tumbler, which was a bit too much. You weren't quite sure how big it was going to get. And I tried pressing oranges since we came home, and been really disappointed. They just not worth doing. The flavour is nowhere near what we had in Spain. I wonder whether some of it's the bit I can remember watching Rick Stein, and he was on his barge going down through France, and he was saying how you taste some local wine, and it's amazing. So you buy a case and you get home and you open a wine and you taste it, and it's actually not that exciting. And of course, you're not on holiday, you're not in France, the sun's not shining, and so all those other bits that made the wine special have been taken away, and you've just been left with the fermented grape juice, and you needed other elements. I suspect there's a bit of that, but also I've just not found oranges that juice like the ones that we got in Spain. But what I used to do, I'm almost there, because before I went to Spain, of course, England is the centre of the planet for apples, and so I used to get freshly squeezed apple juice, not the freshly squeezed stuff you get in Spain where they squeeze the oranges in front of you, but the ones from the supermarket that tell you it's freshly squeezed, which it sort of is a week or so ago, probably longer than that. And I used to put ginger, fresh liquidized ginger and turmeric and pepper and olive oil with it, and have that as a big shot every morning. And I'm going to get back in the habit of that. I think that was a nice pick me up. I was in Glastonbury yesterday. I've been to Glastonbury several times before with DV groups. Used to do silver cycle expeditions through there, but I've never been to the springs, the red and the white springs. And so I thought, right, I was watching Hugh Fearnley-Whittenstall, and he went there. So I went to the springs. The white spring was quite easy to find with the temple, and you can go in there and have a swim. Swim's probably there's a pool you can dunk in. There we go. So I went and had a dunk in in the white spring, which is high in calcium. And then across the road, I paid to go in the gardens, and then realised afterwards I needn't have done that, although I'm glad I did pay to go in the gardens because the gardens were gorgeous. The red springs, which are very high in iron, and they're both tested, I think they're both tested weekly by the council, and so, you know, they're both drinking quality, and so that was really exciting. Went and collected some water from those two springs and brought it home. It's just lovely walking through the woods, listening to the birds and the wind, and looking at the water. I mentioned it lots on the Camino. I think margins are the exciting places. So on the margin here, the woods and the water, or these woods are equally good when you're on the margin between the agricultural fields and the wood. The margin between the road and the woods, a little bit less exciting, although quite often it opens up. It's going to be one in a minute, and it actually gives you a great vista up two of the estuaries, so I won't knock that either. Right, one of the things that I became really quite good at is I'm on several pilgrims' Facebook sites, and some of those posts are really quite inspirational, and I've got in the habit of, when something comes up that chimes with me, of copying that text and putting it in an electronic journal I've got. One of our wish list of things to do is I want to do a photo book with a map and of each day that we went and walked, and the albergue that we stayed at, and the cafes. I was very good at taking photos of each of the cafes we went into. They're all independent. There we go. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. We didn't see a chain cafe. I mean, I'm sure they must exist in Spain at all, and so they're all lovely local places. But anyhow, I'm going to read you one. Camino snoring. And I'm multitasking, so yeah, I might struggle a little bit. To the fallen pilgrim, rest in peace. What better way to go than your own way for your own chosen passion and devotion? I decided to do the Camino for a few days before the walk started. Not for passion, not devotion, but to fill some vacant days on my calendar. Filling the days was relatively easy on the Camino, with all the walking, eating, drinking and chatting with the strangers who were normally not my kind nor my type, but they were fascinating human beings with fascinating stories to share. Some were full of joy, some were a bit sad, but none were bitter and none with despair. And I found them inspiring, always. For me, it's the nights that proved to be more of a challenge. During the first week, I was so irritated by the nightly snoring battle in the albergue dorms, I would spend my waking hours plotting how to silence the top 5 blowers or whistlers. Please rest assured, my fellow dorm mates, I was fully capable of evil thoughts, but definitely not of evil acts. Luckily, my second week I'd found a lesser evil, but more calming way to cope with the nightly disturbances. I would assign each snorer to a specific role in a Mozart opera based on their snoring tonality, pitch as well as volume dynamics. Some of them did not get the role of an evil, and deservedly so. Surprisingly, by the third week, I was no longer annoyed by the nightly dissonant chorus of snoring mob. In fact, I might have even become an active participant myself. Even though I was not able to confirm my own vocal contributions to the rousing chorus. However, my sleep tracker did indicate there was an engaging, if somewhat unusual, pleasurable activity during my REM sleep cycles. When I finally reached Santiago Compostela, it suddenly dawned on me that those days on the Camino had been some of the most relaxing, most peaceful days of my life. I've become a lighter person, physically and mentally, as well as figuratively and literally. If I'd known better, I would probably have not have asked for a full and authentic Camino experience before I start, for I did not know that a bedbug encounter was what made the package full. Nonetheless, the bedbugs have reignited in me lingering itches, pun intended, for answers. If life would be easier with or without a partner. As it happened this time, all the 30 or so bedbug bites clustered in one leg, which was well within easy reach of my fingers, with overgrown nails. But I can't help but worry, what if some bed bites were between my shoulder blades. What a horrible thought. A man can live by many pains, but not an itch he could not scratch. Sorry, I digress. I'm terrible with words. That's why I do cellophane snapshots, although it's been said that a picture worthy of 1,000 words for me. I would be okay with one picture or one word, if that word was wow. It's kind of cool, isn't it? And I've got loads of those. They're really good. And a bed bug thing, we didn't come across any. I have to admit, we didn't stay in the municipal albergues, and we did that on purpose. We looked for really small albergues, with sort of 12 beds. It was part of the experience that we wanted. And from what I understand, the Spanish authorities are really strict. One of the hosts at the albergue said she had to close the day before we were there because she's required to fumigate the albergue on a regular basis for bed bugs and other bits and pieces, and the chemicals are quite noxious, and so the day or the night after they've been fumigated, nobody can stay in there. So we didn't have any bug experiences, and all the pilgrims we met, nobody was ranting and raving about. And yet you can get yourself in a bit of a negative loop if you go on Facebook. My wife was particularly worried about bed bugs, and you would get the impression by reading the Facebook pages that maybe actually bed bugs are a real problem. I would say not. But there you go, that's my personal experience, and I've got loads of these quotes from people that have. Everybody has a lovely experience, and it's addictive. And so, we're going to walk the Portuguese Camino next year, probably in May. And then we're really quite interested in the Japanese one, which they've just twinned with Camino Francaise, I think this year. But I'm not quite sure why. My research so far, it's a bit complicated trying to figure out how that kind of works. And so I just need to do a bit more work. Oh, there we go. I never knew the amount of times I've been up here in the reservoirs. I never realised that there's an old quarry. The water level's dropped. Never knew this was here. Wow, how nuts! And there's another one of these just around the corner. Obviously, I don't swim in the reservoirs. You're not allowed to, but if you did swim, you can swim up to it just over there. Just listening back through my notes, and there's a few bits that I missed. So, absolutely loved the walking a pilgrimage, being a pilgrim. Really it's quite complex. What is a pilgrim? What is a pilgrimage? What's spirituality? They were exciting things to explore. And when we were blessed because we met a guy wrote a lovely book called The Pilgrim. He's walked the Camino or Caminos 10 times. And we also met a group of students from Bucknell University who were doing a unit on the Camino and exploring, what is it to be a pilgrim, what is spirituality and all those sorts of things. And they're not straightforward, easy things to answer, and they're super exciting to explore. So when we come back, we wanted to carry on walking. So we want to walk Saints Way, want to walk Hadrian's Wall. They would be on our bucket list for quite a while. And so Saints Way is down in Cornwall. It's really close to us. It's only 30 miles. We could do it in a day. But we're planning to split it over 3 days. Some of which is from a red setter who's getting quite old. I'm hoping she's going to be able to walk it with us. And so if we do 10 miles a day, I think it's something that's more possible for her. And but it's difficult. The accommodation in Padstow's super easy. There's then 10 miles on from there, you're in the middle of nowhere, and there's just nothing. And then Lostwithiel is great for accommodation, and then Fowey is great for accommodation. I used to do it with my 10 tours students every year as part of their training, and they go and walk it in a day. And then I was thinking, okay, so how do we do that? Can we do the first day and then get a taxi back to somewhere that we can get some accommodation? But it's really nice doing linear walks. That's one of the nice things with the Camino was, not doing circular walks. You travel through so much more landscape, and and if it's just got the stuff that's you need on your back and you're staying in a new place every night. And so one idea was we take 2 cars down there and we do shuttle runs to go and sort out that awkward bit for the first night where there's just nowhere to stay. There is a campsite there, so we could carry their camping stuff, but the Camino taught us that going light's good as well, and just to go and carry the camping stuff for a 3-day walk when only you need it for one night. So that didn't look like a good option. Taking 2 cars down, so we do a shuttle run and we stay in a camper van and wild camp one night. That was another option, but of course it's going to take away from some of the experience of doing that short pilgrimage, having all these car journeys in between. And the idea was we could stay in a camper van where we'd need to stay at the first night, and then the next day drive 1 car up to the start, walk to the camper van, and then when we get to the camper van you drive back and pick the car up, and you can take the car to the finish and then drive back to where we wild camp and camp a night. It's not really it would work, but it wasn't really the experience. So I thought, oh, we'll do it with a taxi. That'll be good. It's like, wow, okay. You're looking at 50 quid plus each way for a taxi. It's not much more than about 12 miles. So it's just cool English prices again. It's like, wow, okay. So it's trying to sort out how you do it. That lack of infrastructure that's just everywhere on the Camino. I think, to be fair, we spoke to people that didn't pre-book their accommodation, and there were some bottlenecks at particular times when we happened to be going through, and people were having to take taxis, similar short journeys, and were paying like €40, and found that they were sharing a taxi with 2 or 3 other people that were also paying €40 each. So the taxi drivers were on a good spin. But if you the way we chose to do it is Kerry frets about not knowing when we're going to sleep the night, and we particularly wanted to stay in small albergues, and so we started off booking 3 or 4 nights ahead, and that actually crept up to about a week ahead, because we found that we were only walking sort of about 20k-ish a day, sometimes up to 30, depending on where that accommodation worked, and we could stick to that. So it's a nice easy routine. Some people would say that it takes away from the Camino experience because you just walk until you're tired and then you look for accommodation, and we met lots of people that did that. So all those sort of things are possible. And we spoke to people that slept in bus shelters and all sorts of bits and pieces. Only because that's what they chose to do. Just lots of some people go on wild camp off the trail, but generally speaking, there's a ridiculous number of albergues, a ridiculous number of cafes, restaurants. The signage is fantastic, and so it's super easy. Saints Way is not, and so it's like, oh, okay, all right. And I spoke to somebody that who met somebody walking the Highland Way, West Highland Way, and they just finished the Camino Francés like us, and then went straight on to do the West Highland Way, and that was their experience. They had to pre-book 6 months in advance to get the accommodation, because there's such little accommodation on the Highland Way, and the accommodation was very poor quality, very expensive, and the people that are running the accommodation on the West Highland Way, this is their interpretation, we're basically just ripping people off. But, I'm sure there must be some nice people on there, but this person that had just come from the Camino Francés was finding it a real culture shock walking Scotland. I must say, we cycled end to end a long time ago, so from John O'Groats down to Land's End, and stayed in B&Bs, and the best accommodation and the best food we found on our journey was through Scotland. So but his experience of the West Highland Way was not great. I mentioned a bit earlier on that we were drinking 3 litres of water a day. When we were on the Meseta, we would drink 2 500ml bottles, so that was a litre, and typically most days we'd stop at 4 cafes, so that would be 4 litres. And then usually when we got into the Alberge, we'd have another 500 litre bottle, another one with dinner. So on some days it was more like 5 or 6 litres of water we were drinking a day. But just that idea that actually most days, and you can tell by looking at the map where the cafes are, you can stop and buy lovely chilled water. You do have to ask for the ice, and you do have to ask for the lemon, but they'll always give it to you with ice and lemon if you ask for it. They'll give it to you without, pretty much always, unless you actually ask for it. I was listening to Rory Stewart, and he was interviewing a professor from America who'd studied, I think it was some baboons for 15 years, male baboons, and looking at how the troop socially interacted and the stresses that were engaged with the troop. He used to go and dart them and do all sorts of tests and bits and pieces on there. And Rory asked him whether he found, because he used to go out there for quite long periods of time, I think a couple of months at a time, when he was studying the baboons each year, whether he found himself lapsing into nature's rhythm, because that was Rory's experience when he walked across Afghanistan. He found that, he'd get up and start at dawn and walk through, and when dusk came it was time to go to sleep, and your body just naturally gets a synergy with nature, and that was our experience, and I think it was this professor's experience as well. So that was a lovely thing from the Camino. And I've not managed to do any dawns. Well, I did do one the other day. It just happened to be a rainy morning, so I didn't get there. It's really nice when you wake up and it's dark and you see dawn break, and then half an hour later, the sunrise. And so I did get up the other day, which is the first time since I've been back, because I enjoyed the watching dawn and sunrise so much. But it just happened to be a drizzly morning, so I got the dawn bit, but I didn't get the sunrise. But I am finding that I'm getting up earlier and going to bed earlier, which is just, our routine was get up just before, or try to get out of the Alberge just before dawn. I think dawn was sort of about 5:30ish, something like that. So we could typically get up at 5, get out the door by 5:30, and you don't want to go and upset all the other pilgrims in the Alberge. And so what we'd do is we'd chuck all our stuff in our bag before we went to sleep. And so when we woke up in the morning, we just grab our sleeping bag and our bag, take it outside to the communal area, so you're outside of the dorm, and then you could get changed and pack your bag properly to disappear off without going and upsetting people. Because if you read all the forums, there's a bit of negativity about pilgrims that get up really early in the morning. I would highly encourage you to do that. The dawn and sunrise was magical, but also it was a lovely cool part of the day, and then we'd be finished usually by 12 o'clock. Have some lunch, which was a salad, have a siesta for 2 or 3 hours, go and explore the town, have dinner, have another little walk, and then go to bed. We typically do about 5,000 steps on top of our normal. I think on average we were walking about 40,000 a day steps. So there's that one. I watch way less telly. I still do watch telly, but it was one of those positive posts that I picked up on, as opposed to something on the Camino. I would quite often watch a movie or part of a movie when I was in the Alberge, put my earbuds on at night and watch a feel-good movie. But the post that I picked up was somebody was talking about you should only go and watch or read things that give you something, and they were particularly saying it should be giving you something positive. I guess life can't be quite that simple, is it? Because sometimes you need to be aware of what some of the challenges are to go and then confront those and make changes. But the news in particular is something that for decades I've watched very, very little. Most weeks would go past and I want to watch the news maybe a few minutes. The closest I get to the news is as I watch Rory Stewart's and Alistair Campbell's analysis, and I really like that. They do two podcasts. One is what's going on in English politics now. Actually, let's go take back. This field of wheat's lovely. Wheat, barley. Camper looks a bit strange there. Somebody parked next to me when I parked up. Honest. I'm gonna dip out of this one. We're lucky where we live. We're lovely. Actually, interesting. This other field of oats. Hadn't realised that. I just noticed that you could see the tors out the side. Ooh, squeaky gate. Isn't that gorgeous? Beautiful field of oats, and then we've got hay tor. There we go. Brain went dead for a second. But what I had noticed when I parked my van up, on this side there's a field of barley. They both look like they're kind of ready to go. Probably just waiting for the moisture content to go down, maybe, or maybe the contractor's going flat out. One of the things I loved on the Camino was this would be fairly industrial scale agriculture for most of the Camino. We did see some bigger stuff, but there's very little of it. You were most of the time almost like going back 50-60 years, and that was absolutely gorgeous. So I watch less telly, and if I do watch telly, it's like, well, actually, what's it giving to me? What's a positive message it's giving me? And the news is terrible on that front, isn't it? I did a long time ago read how through evolution we're hypersensitive to negative stories, and so if you live in a little village and somebody drowns in a pond or whatever it is, you will take great notice, and then you'll go and tell your children or your grandchildren, to be careful around that pond. So that makes great sense. What doesn't work is with, the modern world, is that, somewhere in the world, something terrible is happening all the time, and that's always been reported on the telly. And so if you're not careful, your life just gets full of all these negative stories, and it's not good for you. Murals, a real love of murals. The masses of them on the Camino, and I've become more observant, and they're just lovely, aren't they? They go and brighten up an austere building, and everybody can go and enjoy those. So that's something else I picked up. I mentioned earlier on that every day is a gift, and that you need to be happy with who you are and what you have now. And I don't think that's a Western thing, is it? If we're not careful, it's the poor Americans. Don't want to go and blame them all the time, but there is a bit of a tendency of saying, actually, when I've got this, I'm going to be happy, or when I've got that job or this house, and actually that's not a great way to live life. And so a better way to live life is actually you need to be happy with who you are now. And what you have now, and the Caminos help me with that. I was always really good, but I'm even better now. So there we go. A few more thoughts on my post-Camino experience. Just thought another one I forgot to put in my video is I read a book. Well, listened to a book on the Camino. Beginning of the Camino, listened to a lot of audiobooks, and then as the Camino went on, less and less so. And the same, maybe replaced with a little bit more music, but then towards the end of the Camino, I just found it intrusive music, or or audiobooks. I did still listen to them a little bit, but way less. But only at the beginning of the Camino, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. And one of those was Regenesis, written by a Guardian food editor. I liked it. I was brought up on a farm, and I went to agricultural college for 5 years. I've worked on big estates in America and Oxford and Peterborough. I considered myself, and I've worked in several supermarkets. I thought I understood the food chain. Turned out there was a lot I didn't know. It's a good book. And then there's another guru that I love. I've listened to lots of Michael Pollan. And then there's another one, The Third Plate, Dan, I want to say Cortez is not, Dan something anyhow, American chef. But they're all similar, and Hugh Friendly Wittenstall's another one. They're all on a similar sort of thing. Anyhow, the idea is that you, 3 times a day, you have probably the biggest influence on what happens around you than anything else you do in your life. It's what you spend on your food. And that if you go and look to buy your food as much as possible from farms, farm to fork, then you can support regenerative farming practices that have good husbandry and give their livestock at as best life they can, and regenerates the soil and all these things that actually aren't in place for mass-produced food, the cheap food that you largely buy from the supermarket. And of course, when it goes into the supermarket's coffers, it largely doesn't go into the community. So it's supermarkets are fantastic, in terms of ease of life. And he was saying, actually, don't get hung up too much about buying organic. Organic tends to be super expensive. Actually, a lot of foods, it doesn't really make that much difference whether it's organic or not. Just look for passionate local food producers that want you to come around and have a look at how their food is produced, so you can see firsthand that it is what it is. So I love that idea. Did a bit of research while we were out on the Camino trying to find local ones. It's proven a bit more tricky than I thought, but we're doing a bit. So in a minute I'm going to stop off and buy some. We did it during COVID, buying milk from these wonderful vending machines. It's quite a bit more expensive than buying it from the supermarket, but it's really nice buying it from a local farmer, so the money goes to the farmer rather than in the supermarket coffers. I mean, the supermarkets largely sell milk as a loss leader anyhow. My dad was a milk farmer and dairy farmer, and then also Dad's cows were of that intensive agricultural system, Friesian Holstein crosses. Really not a healthy breed, and it produced fantastic high yields, but to get those high yields you have to feed them a very high protein, energy rich diet, which makes their hooves go soft, which means that they go lame. They can pick up stones in their hooves quite a bit because they're producing so much milk that quite often the ligament that supports the udder will break at some point. It's not very nice, really. And a lot of local farmers now are starting to cross Friesians with Jerseys. Jerseys are beautiful cows, much lower milk production, much higher milk fat, and unfortunately the one I'm getting it from at the moment, from what I can see, is still running a fairly intensive agricultural dairy enterprise, and there's a wonderful series of documentaries on YouTube, if you've not watched it, called Cornwall Climate Change, produced by 2 ladies. They're really, really inspirational at covering everything from energy to erosion, at food production. They're doing 12 altogether. I haven't quite finished them all yet. I think maybe they've done 8 so far, and they get local people to go and champion it. And so the girl that did the one about sea level rise is the person that was presenting was a long distance runner, and she went and ran the Southwest Coastal Path, and then they stopped off and saw the impact of sea level rises was causing in Cornwall, which is most of Cornwall is significantly above sea level, with cliffs and bits and pieces, so you would think maybe it's not going to have that big an impact. No, you'd be wrong. And the programme's great for highlighting all those issues that are going to, well, they're here already. and they were saying, there we go, I was just trying to think what the connection was. I lost the connection for a second. That everybody talks about, I'm going to reverse that with my car now, I'm going to hit pause. So my reversing skills are very good. This van is fantastic, apart from the fact that the reverse is too high a ratio. And then I found out they produced a lower ratio reverse. I got very excited and contacted Citroen to get the lower ratio reverse gear put in, to find out mine's already got it in. Yeah, she doesn't reverse up hills very well at all. She struggles. First gear should go anywhere. Yeah, so everybody in England talks about we've got terrible problems with our rivers, with sewage, and also contaminated sewage, heavy metals from light industry. But she was saying that's actually only half the picture. The other half is actually intensive farming, and mostly dairy farms. They're causing a significant amount of damage, and that one is less well spoken about. It's actually a nice documentary, Sacred Cow, I think maybe it's called. That one's set in Norway, in New Zealand, and they got real problems in New Zealand. Huge industrial dairy farms in New Zealand producing milk that the country doesn't need, but it's sold to Africa as powdered milk, and then to powder it they use coal to go and dry it, powder it, and where these big industrial dairy farms are, they've killed the local rivers. The rivers, obviously, they don't mention in the film, but the rivers would regenerate if the dairy farmers stop. And it tends to be mostly slurry, the cow poo, but also the effluent from silage is a problem. And so there's another farm locally that sells their milk, and they practice really good regenerative farming, and I want to buy the milk from them, but actually they've got their vending machine is an older one, and the milk goes off fairly quickly. So yeah, I'm a bit torn. So I'm getting it from Mount Boone Farm. There we go, for the minute, which is not too bad. So yeah, food to fork. Been doing quite a lot of work with food to fork. Proving a bit more challenged than I thought, but we are getting there. I really like that idea. But yeah, we'll see how we go. There we go. So there's some of my thoughts with Camino, and I guess the biggest one is just go do it. Kerry and me love going and going to talks and of people that do these incredible expeditions around the world, and there's a very, very common theme, which is naivety's actually quite a good thing. Just crack on and do it. And actually, you know, the Camino, all the infrastructure's there. Everybody's absolutely lovely. Just take your time and do it your way. There's no right or wrong way, and you'll, I'm sure, be addicted to it as much as we are on Camino.